Priyanshi Dalke, PGP Batch 2325.
And I, Revati Pandit, PGP Batch 2325.
Welcome you to the second day of the International Conference on Regenerative Ecosystem 2023.
We now request our esteemed panelists to please come to the stage and occupy their seats. The International Conference on Regenerative Ecosystems signifies an occasion where minds delve into the depths of innovative solutions, exchange profound insights, and catalyze collaborative efforts aimed at fostering a resilient and sustainable future for our planet.
In the spirit of unity and collaboration, I encourage you to engage wholeheartedly, exchange ideas freely, and forge connections that transcend the boundaries of discipline and industries. Together, we stand at the forefront of a movement towards regenerative practices. It is my honor to introduce our first panelist, Dr. Devika Kannan. Dr. Devika Kannan is the Deputy Director of Center for Sustainable Operations and Supply Chain Resilience at the University of Adelaide. She has been recognized as a highly cited researcher in engineering for 3 years by Thomas Reuters Clarivate Analytics. She has published more than 85 international journal articles in leading journals such as Nature, European Journal of Operational Research, Omega, and many more. She is also an editorial board member of several international journals. Today, she is joining us remotely through video conferencing. I would like to request a big round of applause for ma'am.
It is my honor to now introduce the second panelist, Mr. R.K. Anil. Mr. R.K. Anil is currently serving as the Executive Director of Seva International. Before this, he has volunteered with the organization for more than 2 years. He has studied engineering science from BITS Pilani and rural management from IRMA. He began his career as an engineer in the steel industry with SAIL, before switching to rural and community development. His last full-time task was as the CEO, NMDC CSR Foundation. Over the past 25 years, he has worked with Grassroots, a non-profit organization in the Thar Desert in Rajasthan, and with the tribal areas of Telangana and Chhattisgarh with UNDP in the rural tourism program across the country. He has facilitated learning and development for students at DMI Patna and conducted research resulting in published case studies on social enterprises, self-governing CBOs, and community-based tourism. His professional interests are in promoting people's institutions and rural livelihoods, making modern management tools for improving the effectiveness of civil society organizations. His hobbies include reading and traveling to understand cultures. He also serves on the National Tourism Advisory Council of the Government of India.
All of you, please give a huge round of applause for sir. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce the third panelist, Ms. Shweta Patnaik, who is presently working as a senior water and sanitation specialist for northeastern states, Uttar Pradesh and Madhya Pradesh at UNICEF. She rolled out and institutionalized the Swachh Bharat movement in the region. Ma'am has been recognized numerous times for her contribution in water management, sanitation, health, and nutrition sectors throughout different roles in her professional career. She has worked with the topmost national and international agencies in this field. She has mentored and managed many teams consisting of MBA graduates, engineers, government officials, students, and NGO activists across different roles in her career. Her leadership skills are inspiring. I request you all to please give a huge round of applause to welcome ma'am.
It is my honor to welcome the next guest, Dr. R.K. Singh. Dr. R.K. Singh is a retired IFS officer. Sir was the Principal Chief Conservator of Forests or the head of Forest Forces. His responsibilities ranged from addressing government on policy matter to overseeing general forest administration. His expertise extends to forest research, silviculture, operations, wildlife management, fire protection, and managing communication infrastructure and buildings. The head of forest forces is instrumental in submitting proposals for the government's consideration, influencing the redistribution of divisions and circles. The meticulous preparation of budget estimates and implementation of government policies further highlight his management skills. We are honored to have you, sir.
Now it is my honor to introduce to you our distinguished moderator for today's session, Professor Mrunal P. Chavra. Sir is a professor of business communications at the Indian Institute of Management, Raipur. He had been the humanities and liberal arts chairperson for 3 terms and is now the chairperson of media and public relations at the institute. Formerly, he was a PhD supervisor in English at CVM University, where he devoted himself wholeheartedly to help the next generation of English language academics and researchers. Sir has also been a visiting professor at IIM Kozhikode and a professor of drama at the Indian Institute of Teacher Education, Gandhinagar. His academic prowess has resulted in him obtaining a PhD in drama from University of Exeter. He is also a published writer. I request you all to give a huge round of applause for our moderator.
I now request Professor Rajiv to please come on stage and welcome Mr. R.K. Singh and Mr. R.K. Anil with a bouquet.
I now request Professor Daniel to welcome our guests, Ms. Shweta, and our moderator, Professor Mrunal P. Chavra, with a bouquet.
I now request our moderator, Professor Runal, to take the discussion forward.
Thank you. Thank you for this warm introduction. Now, I would like this to be structured like this. We'll have each speaker speak and for 15 minutes, and then we'll have 5 minutes of question answer session. And I will invite questions from the students body. And if there are questions from panelists within themselves, we can interact on those lines, right? Does that work for you? Okay, so I first request Shweta ji to start their presentation. Thank you. Projected slides. Slides, please. You want to begin?
Yeah.
This one.
This one. Yeah.
Maybe
Change around.
if you want, we can look.
other one should also open. There are few open here. This one, this. Let it be. Yeah, this is fine.
Good afternoon, everyone. And before I start, I think I wanted to thank IIM for involving UNICEF here, and special thanks to Professor Daniel and Professor Rajas, and also Professor Shantanu here, who's been really engaging with us and giving us an opportunity to engage at this level. So I am not going to speak a lot, but I was told that it will be more free. I mean, more a conversation than a presentation. But why I wanted to project this was because most of the times when discussions happen, and in these contexts, especially when we are talking about regenerative ecosystems, sustainability, big words, and what comes to mind from the context where I'm coming from are two things. One is that uh, most of the times policymakers either are afraid or feel scared or switch off, thinking there are going to be more rights-based discussions, and here we go. That's one side. And the other side is when we are looking at large infrastructure, we think that everything, there needs to be structures in place for these kind of things. And there'll be a lot of infrastructural investments that need to go into it in the subject matter here. So that's the other part. And most of the times, these two beings do not talk to each other. And where do we come in? There is a larger UN that is there, and all of you here know about it. But we as an organization like UNICEF also talks about, and one of the core organizations that talks about children in the whole space. Then the discussion goes that what do children have to do in large infrastructure projects? And I worked for many years and I've been working on this very huge infrastructural investments that is drinking water and sanitation. And every time, even within my own organization in UNICEF, people sideline us, even if we bring in the most investment, saying that you are not the one. Every time there's a children's issue, they talk to sectors which deal in child protection and not to sectors that deal with drinking water and infrastructure projects. So I want all of you to think about, because you are like, it's a very cliched thing, and I have been there where you are sitting. And there are these things about you who will change the thought process and continue to do so. You will deal with other challenges as you go through and become leaders on your own, right? And then there is this environment where there are the professors who help you think through and strategize and become the leaders that you plan to be. So in that context, I thought that Rohit, my colleague here, mentioned, and then I went back and checked that the COP28 is going on right now. And I think just it will be getting completed. And the COP33, the Honorable Prime Minister has invited that the COP33 to be held in India. If you look at what happened a few months ago, and even IIM Raipur has hosted it, the G20 summit was for this year was being hosted by India. And so there have been conversations across the country, and leading educational institutions involved. And there is a Y20 beam also that is there, and asking young people to be part of the conversation, and also drive and influence that process. So similarly, for COP33, something like that is going to happen. And you would be all in positions of importance, and there'll be other young people sitting here. So you would know who to take on, who to hire, and what kind of skill sets that you should have beyond a degree from, say, IIM Raipur. In this COP28, earlier organizations like mine were not getting involved. The larger UN was involved, but it was discussed, and we made a considered decision that we should be looking at participation of young people and also amplify the need to centralize children as an important group that should influence decisions of policymakers. And in that, we were looking at having a declaration for children and how the UNFCCC process can have more young people to be part of that. And when we are looking at young people, one is the voices, which is very important, but the other is also what are the skill sets that we should have, the competencies that we should have, and the policy environment on one side and the skilling environment on the other side, and then the hiring process or the businesses that should be involved to make it an enabling environment for something like this to become a reality. So when we are talking about regenerative ecosystems and an institution like IIM Raipur talking about it, it gives a lot of hope that we are getting into it in a very professional manner beyond the desks of activists and talking to mainstream people who would become leaders of businesses or leaders of profits or non-profits. So in that, we would have more voices, and also we would have more resource allocation, because these would cost, and it would cost a lot. So we have to think as to if leaders would make commitments to ensure those resources are in place, not just political leaders, but business leaders and people from non-profits, without taking shortcuts. So this was something that we had pulled out as to in COP25, in COP30, what would happen, and this is the vision that we were looking at, that it would establish a formal process to prioritize children. So this time we're thinking, but in the COP30, the discussion is that if we can have a formal process, and formal process is not just from one country, but countries like us. And I wanted to say that there is a program called the Yuva program in India, which the Prime Minister has launched, and it is being piloted in India because of the largest number of young people that's there in this country. It's not there in any other country. And it's a UN government engagement. How many of you have heard about the program like that? You've heard? Okay. And then you would know that there would be a lot of industry leaders also who are engaged in that and looking at skill sets for young people to be more engaged and how they can drive the thing. And this whole thing on climate agenda is a major part of that. Others who don't know, go and read up on it. And maybe you can also add your voice to that and give your ideas as to drive it. Because largely it's being driven by people who are not so young anymore, like me. So if you add your voice to that, then it would become more energized. The other thing that was looking at, if you're looking at it, one of our thing is also if it could have a global climate financial architecture. So that is something which even here we are looking at, and government of Chhattisgarh as well as other departments, as to when we are looking at investments and thinking of ecosystems like this, what would the financial architecture look like, and what kind of investments and skill sets that need to be there to look at that, and if there is investment, why would somebody invest? So those kind of information. And then 4 areas, which are mitigation, financing, adaptations, and then looking at loss and damage. Somebody mentioned here that instead of looking at doing less good, doing less harm, looking at doing more good. There used to be a conversation earlier where we had all signed up as civil servants, is that do no harm policy. But I am happy that people are mentioning here about doing more good and not just sticking to do no harm, because doing more good would need more proactively investing ourselves and our own commitments to that. Then we look at also, because this is a conference and looking at how to take this forward, and there are leaders here who have already worked a lot, while we are only we talk more on facilitating policy and engaging and building or supporting the government vision. So I would think that having everybody here is actually quite a big start, and having this in Chhattisgarh. But I would request all of you to also look at Government of India policies on that. See, and you will actually feel quite proud that, silently the Indian government has built a lot of, incorporated a lot of policies. How many of you know that when it comes to solarization and solar power, India is a leading country in adding capacities to that, and the fastest growth rate is also being registered by India. How many? You can raise your hands. We can all feel proud together about it. Okay, good. So which means that industries will be involved, and people engaging to be, leaders in the industry would also look at those kind of systems. Build your own skill sets, and when you hire, look at people with those skill sets. Yes. And so I'll end with two things. But before that, you must have also heard when one set of people are talking a lot about the heat levels rising, and there is this whole heating process that is happening. The dinosaurs had disappeared, so that the earth goes through this process every few centuries. So everything that we are doing right now is not contributing to this global heating, but the earth just goes through this heating. Has anybody heard this conversation? That when the dinosaurs were there were no cars, still they became extinct. So now why are people blaming all the humans for adding to the ozone layer? Who has heard this conversation? Anybody? No? You will hear, it's coming. So there is this conversation that happens that, the dinosaurs became extinct, the ice age melted, and we are here. So there were no humans that time to contribute to this great disaster that's in the making right now. So why did it happen then? Because the earth just decides one day that I will heat up, and then, have a new system in place and let go of the old things. Those are also happening, but that doesn't, so we should have a conversation and argument in place to say and inform properly, because a lot of powerful entities who would come with these kind of conversations and push the thing, saying whatever we do, it doesn't harm. We can add up to plastic, it won't happen. Because the dinosaurs became extinct, there was no plastic then. There was nobody adding to industrial pollution then. Nobody dug up and, finished all the water then. Even then they became extinct. So why are we being blamed? So with that, I think I would go back and sit and hear the other speakers and think about it, how it is happening. Thank you.
Thank you, Swetaji. I would request you to stay there.
Okay.
If there are any questions at this point, students can raise them, and we can have a couple of questions from the audience.
Hello. Hello, everyone. My name is Sumit, PGP batch 2325. Ma'am, in one of your slides, you have mentioned the outcomes of COP. There was a term, climate finance. Could you please more talk about that topic, climate finance?
Okay. Okay, before I say, do you have any thoughts what you thought was climate finance?
As far as I think, there must be a kind of financing the climate actions which we are going to take.
Perfect. That's what it is.
Oh.
And the strategies on how to go about looking at financing for investing in climate proofing or mitigating the thing. So you are quite on target.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, this is Neha Shah from PGP Batch 2325. So we have always heard about UNCCT Corp, UNFCCC Corp. So there we talk about ideas, right? So what about the implementation part? So like we are talking about climate finance. So whatever ideas or discussions that is happening in COP. So like what is, like I want to learn from you, what is the implementation part of the ideas that are being tackled through COP, through UNCCT and UNFCCC?
Very good question, because that is what even we are asking, that we are only talking on air and policies. It needs to be invested there. But okay, coming to like one of your questions, there is this, there is a investment, and there is sir here also who will be able to say more. There's a readiness fund also, which is being provided to entities and to governments, where this climate readiness fund, where there's Rohit here who would be able to say more about it, on how to make your institutions, your capacities ready to implement climate sensitive or climate responsive programming, and how do we build it into each vertical, whether it is your human resource, other resources, your infrastructure, your implementation strategy. So there is a fund that comes for the readiness funding. Do go and read up on those. There are things like the Green Climate Fund. You can also check out those to get ideas on what is happening. And you can also see what's happening in India and in other countries on that particular page. I also have a strategy document which I'll share with you, Professor Santanu. If anybody is interested, you can mail it to them.
Very good afternoon, everyone. Ma'am, there is recently being talks about carbon tax that has been going around, especially in Western circles, that they will tax the countries in accordance to their carbon emission that they're having. So what are your thoughts on that? And since the most emitter per capita emitter of carbon are the United States and China and not India, so but they are still focusing upon coming up with this carbon tax of per capita basis. So what are your thoughts upon that?
Good question, because yesterday at the dinner place, there were 3 professors here also from IIM talking about this whole thing on carbon taxing. And there are 2 thoughts. I can't say what is my thing, because I'm still sitting on the fence and thinking that some funding is good. But there are 2 kinds of thoughts to that. One is that if the polluter pays, or and tax people who emit more carbon. So there are these things, and people who are polluting should pay more. The other one is this other school of thought on that is that, are they going to keep emitting that and get away by only paying for it in terms of money? Okay, and there are people getting impacted because of that, and the whole environment is getting impacted, and it is one earth and one planet. So at one point, if they're doing that, should they be getting away with that? And should we not hold them to account to reduce that carbon footprint and not just pay for it? So this is another school of thought. UNICEF doesn't have an opinion on it yet. So that's one. So this is up for discussion, and there are I think I would also request you to ask the same question to the 2 leaders who are sitting here as well. I am also interested to hear. So
Okay, Sweta ji, I have a question for you as well.
yes.
Um, You mentioned about COP 2030, and it's really honored to have you here. And speaking about 2030, the way you have reached out. My question is really related to how can UNICEF reach out to those who are not even have not even heard of UNICEF in remote or interior parts. Looking at your websites, you have regional languages as well. You can translate it as well. But still, the documents, reports, which are really substantial with research and outcomes and have some policy directives as well. So how children, because that's the focus where you are thinking right now. So how can they access this? And what are the ways in which you can help them to navigate these resources?
Thank
Besides
you.
just visiting website.
Oh, this is actually good because that is our strength. I think we are one of the UN agency or the only UN agency that works with the remotest of the people. In Chhattisgarh, our focus districts where we work through partners, through young volunteers, I would say, which we have prioritized with the government here is Sukma, Bijapur, Dantewada, and Bastar, and that whole 7 districts. And the motto is that we are the provider of the last resort, and if not us, then who? So coming to your question, so UNICEF works has the largest footprint in terms of the feet on the ground in terms of other UN bodies, because we were considered an implementing organization which implements on the ground. So we have core sectors which looks at survival of the child, which is child survival, which is health, and looks at measles immunization, polio immunization. So these are all UNICEF beams, which works very closely with the government on measles and polio. My sector, drinking water and sanitation, and now it is climate, work very closely with the government now on Swachh Bharat, but working since the 1970s, when Government of India invited UNICEF to support the drought that was happening in the 1970. And if anybody has seen the Mark II hand pump, which is there everywhere, from there to now we are looking at a functional tap connection in every household. India has come a long way, and very proud to be saying that, because it's one country which is doing that. But people, you have seen the hand pump with the long handle, silver color. Yes, so that was when UNICEF used to do things on the ground, and that's a technology that UNICEF, along with span pumps and Government of India, had worked out, and which costs very less compared to, say, an African country where that pump will cost $10,000 to here, which costs us 80,000 rupees. So this is one. And communication, my colleague is not here. We have a thing called social and behavior change communication beam that works with sectors like mine, health, nutrition, water, sanitation, to convert this so that the person on the ground, accountability to affected population, can access, and their behaviors can be impacted by this communication tools that are being given to them. Recently, very recently, because we are also looking at forests, and sir is here, in Bastar and Dantewada region, we are looking at piloting a very small thing called One Mitan with the forest department, looking at engaging the young people there to be more involved in that. So that's how engaging at the remotest, and that's the strength that we play to.
Right.
Yeah.
I have one more and last question, if you don't mind.
Yeah, please do.
See, I have worked with WASMO, that is in Gujarat, and I was volunteering as an actor and working in the drought region in Saurashtra. So we used to travel to from Ahmedabad to other parts of the Gujarat, and we faced a lot of challenges, even though I was Gujarati, in terms of language and culture, the urban and rural divide and digital divide and all sorts of things. I would like to understand from you, because you have been working in water sanitation in Northeast region. So are these problems still exist, and how, let's say I want to volunteer, I want to work on something on those lines, how can one initiate and come out of those barriers?
In terms of communicating to
In terms
people.
of reaching out.
Yes, in terms. So in the northeastern, so I was not from UNICEF, I did not work in MP and UP. That was in my previous capacity. But Northeastern region in Assam and the Northeastern states, I worked. So to reach out, UNICEF doesn't have a lot of staff members that way. But we work very closely with Tejpur University and Dibrugarh universities and the students there and professors to come out with a communication strategy on how to reach people in each of those northeastern states. It's still going on, but it was largely for immunization and one component on sanitation. What happened in the northeastern region and what I see in Chhattisgarh is the normal community themselves have a very high priority on hygiene. So it was not the same as some other states where you needed to make a lot of effort. People themselves were there. But when it comes to immunization, so Tejpur University then developed a course on communication for development, a 2-year full-time course based on the experiences, so that you have people who are skilled to actually deliver such strategic communication. And so did Dibrugarh University. So I think this is a good conversation. We should have more on these this thing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
If you have any other questions, the floor is open. Yeah. Saurabh?
Good afternoon, panelists. Myself, Saurabh Singh, PGP batch 2325. My question open to the whole panelists and ma'am also. Yeah, ma'am talked a lot about COP28. This is going in UAE. So, and about to happen COP 2030 and other is also lined up. But my question is, this all COP is the participation of all the countries. But in the recent COP, the main 2 leading countries who are the main pollution generator, USA and China, is not there. So don't you think that these platforms are becoming more political driven in spite of initiative driven to tackle over this political calamities and all? And the second question is that they had done created a
Just
investment.
one question. Sorry, one question.
Okay.
Is it to me? He said to all the panelists. I'm hoping someone.
I think you have asked a very interesting question. Every decision ultimately is the outcome of a political process. So you may have heard about technical rationality and political rationality. And we all are trained in our academic institutions to become more technical and bring that rationality. But ultimately you realize that what you can do is try to educate the political masters so that you can bridge the gap between technical rationality and political rationality. But you are right, most of the international bodies working on environmental governance, they're not democratized. And therefore, India has to play a very important role. We are saying that we should become a leader of Global South. And that is how we can actually exert some pressure. And the economic activities are not separated from environmental the governance part. The one question that was asked about the CBAM, my answer as an Indian would be different. My answer would be that we agreed on, the historical burden of pollution. I think there's a divergent view between Global South and Global North. So you already have polluted. Now you are asking me to come on the same platform. We agreed on a common but differentiated responsibility. But now you're saying, no, we'll have a common goal and common responsibility. That will be my take as an Indian. But if you talk about global citizen, then ma'am has given you the answer.
Let's give her a big round of applause. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Again, you must have already read upon something called NDCs, National Development Contributors. So in that COP also, it will be each government's NDC that will count. And what just mentioned that India has its own stand on that. So it will help you to see that in that context.
Thank you. I would, yeah.
Should I also expose, should I expose my ignorance on that subject? Those of you who are students of history must have also read about League of Nations after the First World War. Then you must have also have read about how all these international institutions, apart from UN, came into being after the Second World War. So, and most of us also know that in spite of being the largest democracy and the most populous country, we are not even on the Security Council. So there are many inequalities there. That's one part of it. But it's the cloud that matters. That also is one thing. And agar aap bahar jab charcha karenge, then in fact, although I had worked with UNDP for a while, we still believe, I mean, outside, this is more of a talk shop in the sense that, but that's one opinion. The other opinion is after Second World War, it has been nearly how many years? 55, around 75 years, more than that. And then we have not gone into a similar worldwide calamitous situation as in Second World War. So to some extent, perhaps credit can be given to UN and its agencies, or it could be just incidental. But then it is not a strictly democratic process in any case. It all depends on how strong you are and to what ecosystem do you belong out there. So let's talk about it later.
Thank you, Anil sir. Now I would request Dr. R.K. Singh to present his views.
Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank IIM RAIPUR for giving me this opportunity to interact with the bright minds. As my colleague said, fellow panelists said that the people who are going to take very important position, and because of that, you are going to have very important responsibilities in the future. And thanks to the organizers, my moderator, Professor Chawda, my fellow panelists, and dear students. So what I like to talk, in fact, I like to pick up from the question that was asked, India's role in environmental governance, and then we'll like to talk about some of the challenges that are not really being discussed, because you are aware of most of the challenges, but some of the challenges are not being discussed to the extent which is really desired. And then we'll discuss about what could be the way out. So the first thing is, what could be the India's role in the environmental governance? You know that this issue has become globalized and regionalized, and rightly so, because it's a global common. So no one nation can actually manage the global environment, and therefore it has to be globalized. So I think two very important roles of India is, one is in the shaping global policies, because what is happening gradually with all the national governments, the policies, the acts, the legal and policy frameworks, they're heavily influenced by the global decisions. As a sovereign country, we sign treaties, agreements, covenants, that become binding on us. And we also sign non-binding principles, something like that. And it has a great implication both on our legal framework, like, for example, the recent amendments in the Wildlife Act was because we signed the CITES. And the second, that your scheme, which of course is linked with the budget. So the two important things, the legal framework and your budgetary allocations and the implementation, they are heavily influenced by the global decisions. And if you talk about the most important decision today, one is from the desertification. You may be aware that this is the decade of desertification. The second one, which is being talked about, is about the loss of biodiversity, Act 30. You might have heard about that. The third one, of course, climate change. And apart from that, we have signed several treaties at a regional level and national level. These three are, of course, very important. So India has to play a very important role. And as we discussed, that Global South and Global North has a very divergent view, not only on the historical burden of pollution, the financing that was talked, the transfer of green technologies, their target dates. There's several issues on which, there's a divergent views on global south and global north. So India has to play a very important role globally also, because we are emerging as a leader of global south, and rightly so. There we have to play a very important role. And the second one is putting our own house in order. I think from the management of environment or governance of environment, these are two very important goals. But before we discuss about the environmental governance, I like to, in fact, flag some of the issues that are not being discussed. Whenever we talk about climate crisis, we talk about several things, losing livelihood. Madam discussed about adaptation, mitigation measures. Recently, we had COVID, right? And what would be the possible loss? In fact, Mr. Kavi, who was with me, your colleague, he was asking me this question. Should we actually sacrifice the economic development for conserving the ecology? I said that you should not really separate, because then we'll be heading towards a sudden death. Like what happened in COVID? Just one virus. And the estimated loss of US, this is a old, in fact, not updated one, I saw last time, it was around $16 trillion. And it should be more now, I think, with better estimation. Just one virus. One report which is there, you can Google and find it out. Escaping the era of pandemics. There are two important group of animals, mammals and avians. Only two group of animals, we have 17 lakh undiscovered viruses, 17 lakhs. And out of 17 lakhs, up to 8.5 lakhs can be transferred to humans. And what you do? When there's a virus attack, you go for vaccine, and whatever we are talking about, the preparedness is all about, kind of a typical reactive reaction, where how many beds you have, ICU, the oxygen, doctors, paramedicals. Nobody is talking about, why the viruses, they were there in the environment. If it's not leakage from the lab, they are there in the environment, but they're happily there in the woods. Under what conditions they leave the wood? The disease ecology is very less understood subject. How the host pathogen relationship, you normally see that when during rainy season, you start coughing. In fact, many people get fever. Some of the changes that you like pneumonia, you are hearing about that. So what are the main reasons? In fact, the 70% of the emerging infectious diseases are zoonotic. They are mostly coming from the wild animals. But why? Because we are destroying their habitat. We are forcing them to move out. So it happens so that wildlife, livestock, and human being, they are getting more opportunities to in contact with each other, and that's where the transmission will take place. So if you destroy their habitat, definitely they'll come to human habitation. And unfortunately, this issue is not being discussed, that we should look for prevention. And whenever we talk about, the term this economy, we always talk about economic growth. Our economic indicators from India's perspective, I'm saying, look quite promising for the investors, that we all know. But that's not the case with the social indicators. The same is the case with Chhattisgarh. Our economic indicators are quite promising, but that is not the case with the social indicators. Within Chhattisgarh, if you talk about, ma'am talked about, some of the remote areas where I have worked 85 to 90. I was in Bastar, Bijapur. I have seen that area a long back. Look at the developmental indicators of particularly vulnerable tribal groups and compare with the national average. And then you will realize, are we really heading in the right direction? Will it actually, can we have peace and prosperity with this kind of development? That is the question that we need to answer, in fact. So we should not only talk about, although you can say that sustainability includes, inclusiveness and climate resilient growth. But I would say that no, you separately, because we have failed in terms of redistributive policies. The redistributive policies has only come as a freebies, which actually kills the entrepreneurship. largely because of the political gains that we are discussing, in fact. So that's a very important question to be answered, that whenever we are talking about economy, I think we should separately flag about inclusiveness, because our growth is not inclusive. There's a lot of disparity which is taking place, and we definitely, they like, the PVTG, we must positively discriminate in our development policies. Unless we are going to do that, it's not going to work. I'm not saying that we have not done, but it's not sufficient enough to actually uplift them from where they are. So when we talk about environmental governance, as you know, there's a multi-dimensional, and it's a cross, in fact, cross dimension. This is not something which can be addressed by one ministry or one department. But if you look at the architecture of the government, how we are organized, you have heard about, the concurrent list, central list, and the state list. There's clear-cut division, the functional division. As a student of business administration, you would say this is the right way to do that, right? And within the state also, we follow the same thing. So it's basically a monocentric. So we have tried to do what? One is the horizontal integration, where one department, like in our case, our department, my former department, I would say, in the state level, at the central level, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change becomes the nodal agency. And they are supposed to coordinate with other departments so that we can provide our country, in fact, a safe environment. But that has not really worked for such a issue which is multidimensional and cross-dimensional, right? It has not really worked. So what has happened in the recent past, not I would say in the recent past, over the years, that polycentricity is gradually increasing at the global level and at the local level as well. Like I said, that at a global level, if you look, I discussed about the three important goals of biodiversity, climate change, and desertification. They're separate bodies. When we say polycentricity, it means that they're not a part of hierarchy. They're relatively taking important decisions. Now, actually it's desirable. And it's not only limited to the typical government, I would say. There are many non-state actors that are participating. The private sector, the civil society organization. So it's a kind of inclusive governance, but it's a polycentric. It's desirable, but the challenge is of coordination and collaboration. How can we have a very collaborative ecosystem for environmental governance? And that is the biggest challenge. At a local level also, you see, like in my service time, the forest department used to be the sole department. Now there's so many organizations at the local level. So forest guard would be there at the beat level. Now we started with the Joint Forest Management Committee. You all have heard about Forest Right Act. So we have now CFRR, Community Forest Resource Right. So there are separate committees. Now in our country, we have more than 2.8 lakhs biodiversity committees. That's a separate committee. Local governments, the Gram Panchayats, urban local bodies, they are also given responsibility in environmental domains, and very important one, right? So they are also share responsibility. But how do we collaborate? That has become a challenge. Now, how can we get answer? Because I'll not take more time. I'd like to have more interactive discussion. You all know about, PM Gati Shakti. So, you know how many ministries are collaborating together? 18 ministries. So it's a digital platform with 1900 layers of data. All the 18, now 22 ministries probably, 22 ministries and all state governments and union territories, they are collaborating. And there's for functional responsibility, there's a structure. There's a group of secretaries, and ultimately it's monitored by the Prime Minister. So it's a model of integrated planning and coordinated implementation, which is monitored at the highest level by the Prime Minister. Now, MOEFCC could not exert that kind of influence in other ministries. In 1992, after returning from Rio, in fact, at that point in time, Mr. Kamal Nath was our minister. So we came out with a policy which is known as a Natural Conservation Strategy and Policy Statement on Environment and Development 1992. You can see that, you can find it out. If you Google it, you can find it out. What it talks about, how can we create a condition in which the development, all the development departments can actually factor these the environmental conservation or the conservation in their developmental decision. But by and large, there are some few changes in the policies, but it has not been really implemented. The reason is, if you really look at what has happened or worked at the global level, what has worked is that when the coordination body was housed in either the office of the prime minister or the president, depending on the country about which we are talking and what is the structure, there it has worked. So definitely we need a kind of, but even in PM Gati Shakti, the state actors are not playing very important role. But when we talk about environment, they have to play very important role. Why? Because you can't only talk about supply. You have to think about the demand. You can imagine the demand by 2047 will be 1.42 billion. 1.64 billion, 1.64 billion, and 50% of the people will live in urban areas. 82 crores people living in urban areas with a rapidly growing middle class, aspirational middle class will consume a lot, and you can imagine the amount of pressure they will exert on our environment. And the biggest challenge would come from the urban ecosystem, the industrial ecosystem. And are we ready for that? As you said that the two important players were the most powerful, they did not attend. Now come to India. What about, the industries? Do you agree that they're the most powerful because they have the most of the resources under their control? Now you talk about the ESG reporting. What SEBI says, only top 1,000 by market capitalizations are supported, and a lot of greenwashing is taking place across the world. I'm not saying it's happening only in India. So it's all, the powerful people, but why they are doing so? When we say that countervailing power will always remain with the people in a democracy, it means our people are not sufficiently aware. And there I see a role for the academic institutions and the students like you. We all talk about pollution, and when you talk about pollution, we say that 92% of the population, global population, they live in the areas where air quality are not up to the standards of WHO, right? But that in fact doesn't really, I am not able to relate as a person living in a Raipur. But if I find in fact a study of a Raipur, of a particular reason, that this is the pollution has resulted in this much of morbidity, mortality, loss of productive days, things like that, I can actually relate myself. And then you can have forums, and these organized groups can really be very, very effective in policymaker advocacy, which is very important. As we say that if you're fighting with the powerful people, you can only fight, and your struggle, you must be organized. You have seen what has happened in the agriculture policy, where a very powerful government has to reverse its decision. But it's organized. So very important role that, that we all talk about evidence-based policy. But our academia or the research, are they providing the relevant knowledge for the policymakers or the people who are engaged in the advocacy with a good science? That's the question. Because I have come to academic institutions, so I must raise this question. But I think that is the most important thing, that we must democratize everything, not only the government. We talk about the citizens' science, unless you involve people right from the data collection, you cannot actually bring that kind of a passion for change. And that is what is required for a kind of a good environmental governance. And unless that happens, rest everything, you can talk about appropriate green technology, you can talk about institution, the many things, many parameters being talked in the literature. But for me, what the most important thing is, ये सोए हुए लोगों को जगाना. हमारे देश में भगवान को भी जगाना पड़ता है और वो हर साल उठाना पड़ता है. तो ये जो सोई हुई जनता है, इसको जगाने का जब तक काम नहीं होगा, probably our future generation will have to live in the gas chambers, and how long they will survive, that only God can answer. So I'll stop here because I like to have more questions from the young minds, and because it's your future. I think you 2/3 of our life we have already lived, in fact. So I think I'd like to hear from you what is bothering your mind, right?
Thank you very much, sir. Questions?
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Shobita Brata Chatterjee. So, sir was saying that growth is not inclusive. So that's true. And along with that, that urbanization is causing a major hampering of the ecosystem. But I want to reflect upon the issue called stubble burning and its causes in Delhi. So stubble burning is not a cause of urbanization, but a rural impact. And the government hasn't yet found any like solution to that. So what is the way forward? We have been trying for long. So that is my question.
See, where you stand on a issue depends where you sit, right? If I'm a farmer, I'll do the same thing, right?
Yeah.
Because for a rational person, it's an economic decision, right? So like government has tried to answer where the market has failed in terms of like MSP is an answer, right? So ultimately the government has to come up with, or maybe some technological solutions which makes it economic. You know, the many technologies have come, in fact, some of they are manufacturing also. The one was, you know, how do we recycle it? So IIR, that hasn't really worked. In fact, it was said that it worked. IRI or ICR, in fact, came up with something which converts that into nutrient very fast, you know, but somehow that did not become very popular. The other is, you know, procure that, use it for paper making or to board or replace thermocol. There are examples. Somehow there is some lack of incentive, or maybe that viable gap funding which is not taking place, and that is the reason that we have not been very successful in that. So it's not about, let me caution you, it's not about, you know, a divide between urban and the rural people. We're talking about a society, right? It's not urban and rural. They're all, you know, a part of action that that you see is out of ignorance. The other is that we know, but we do it for our economic gain, right? I think the first one, even we are not able to answer the first one, right? So it's as I said, it's a multi-dimensional, and it really requires, when you talk about, you know, tragedy of commons, you know, what is the answer of tragedy of commons? It's being debated since so many years. Mutual coercion, mutually agreed upon. There's a limit to growth. You can't consume endlessly, and you can't define, you know, the development means increasing choices. That's what Amartya Sen says. Should not only be the means, but the goal of development. But at whose cost? If you are increasing your choices at the cost of other, will you say that's a good development? Right? So there's some fundamental questions that we need to answer, right? If we want to. So ultimately, in fact, I saw in your paper, when talk about relations, that becomes very important. Regenerative or ecosystem, you know, that our culture, what it says, that we are related to abiotic. Definition of ecosystem came, in fact, much later. But our in fact, forefathers said that पंच तत्व से बना शरीरा, और अगले जन्म में किस योनि में 84 लाख में जन्म होगे. That means you are related to abiotic and all the living organization. So you don't look for instrumental value, rather look for intrinsic values, and that conditions in which we allow recreation of those old good values, probably that will save, because ultimately somewhere down the line you have to think about minimalism. Excessive energy consumption, we actually cannot continue as a society.
Thank you, sir.
Hello, sir. Sir, this is Rashmi Prajapati. And we have talked about businesses, and you just mentioned ESG reporting. So in line with it, there is Carbon Disclosure Project, CDP, been in place. So how effective do you think CDP is in India and forward?
I do not have data, so I won't be able to tell you about, you know, but any disclosure has not been very effective. The perception that I get from reading the newspapers, this is a perception. And based on that perception, what I'm talking is opinion, not based on, some evidences, hard evidences that I can say. But for any regulation, it will become effective only when, see, when we'll talk about regulation, I'll just like to give you a very simple example, right? At the one end, it is the values that you have internalized that controls you. Like, we say a very frail woman in a hot summer when you are going out and she's asking for, money that I had not anything for last 3 days. What will you do? You'll give some money to her, right? So there's no external pressure, right? It is your own internal decision. And that moment, if you don't do that, come back and start eating, you are reminded of that, scene, and you feel guilty. That guilt is forcing you to act, right? So it's your internal control. No administrative cost involved in it. No governance structure involved in it, right? So that is one spectrum where people are self-regulated. The other is that, no, there is a regulatory regime. So what it requires, one, is that deviant behavior must be captured. So either there is a camera which captures the deviant behavior, it has a cost. Then, so you have a credible system which captures the deviant behavior. And then you have a credible judiciary which delivers. We all know from our experience what is the cost involved in both of it and what time it will take. So I think when you have in a normal distribution curve, deviant behavior on both sides 2-3%. Even in cinema, you see one person running, and 4 police wala piche bhag rahe, ek chor ke piche.
Yes, sir.
Right? If the deviant behavior, like, Punjab, government has failed. How government can act? When 30% of your population are deviant behavior, then you require another 60% to actually catch them and create evidence. Can it work? So it's not going to work. So I think we need to think about, the process of socialization, building a culture, which in fact people become self-regulatory. So if that happens at an organization level, then the people working in that particular, enterprise or the business house, they'll start asking questions. The people living in and around, if they are sufficiently aware and they are given gadget to monitor, what is this pollution level? Because it's a source pollution. What is the carbon footprint of that particular business organization? They will hold them accountable. So unless we are getting in that direction, simply voluntary reporting or some kind of reporting cannot be a very foolproof system.
So CDP is not voluntary reporting. It's just
No,
that
even BRSR is not voluntary. It is
Yes,
mandatory. But even saying I'm in the mandatory reporting also, there are many loopholes. Right?
Thank you, sir.
Sir, I have a question on this side, sir. Here.
Oh, sorry.
Sir, very interesting talk, and I would pick up where the deviant behavior started. The contemporary society, what we talk about and what we see in terms of ESG and all that, this brings a lot of issues with societal moral issues, ethical issues, and so on and so forth. And that also brings another dimension to character building, right? And with examples leading from the front, our Prime Minister Modi ji is perhaps way ahead of the times, perhaps. But then this entire discussion is, what I see is, do we really need to reevaluate the purposes of the enterprises, the organization, and perhaps the life that we lead in the light of the discussion that we are having right now?
That's I think I completely agree with you that we need to revisit, because even the businesses that are thinking about sustainability, because ultimately they are drawing resources from the nature. If you will not get those resources in the future, you won't survive. You won't survive. So I think if you have a long-term perspective, even the businesses will tend to become more responsive. And when you feel related to your society and you feel that you must give back to the society, that kind of feeling, that if you are powerful means you are expected to give more to the society, to the less powerful people you are supposed to help. Unless we have that kind of principled leadership, because ultimately leadership will have to play a very important role. If you have people like the former US president, who is a complete denial mode of climate change, in fact, and what can you expect, in fact? And the political debate, 0.04 becomes 0.05 vote. How does it really matter? Right? But somebody should say that, just a pinch of potassium cyanide, or how does it matter? You take a salt. So it's, politicians, they try to, in fact, deviate people or change the focus of discussion in a direction which is beneficial to them. Right?
Good afternoon, sir. My name is Sudhir. Sir, at the end, you mentioned that our future generation is going to be live in the gas chamber. Like, what is solution of it? Like, one side we are saying we are trying to achieve our GDP to 5 trillion by extracting our resources as much as possible, and other side we are trying to say like that we are trying to protect our environment. So how can we balance both the things?
I think the one issue which is being discussed as a solution is democratizing, following the democratic processes in creation of knowledge wherever we are deficient. Whether climate solution, there's a huge deficiency of knowledge and technology. In governance, how do we democratize? Hold, in fact, the local governments, like Kerala government recently came out with the eco-restoration policy. It envisages, in fact, the policy envisages carbon neutrality for every panchayat. The problem is in an implementation framework where it only talks about plantation. You all know that only plantation cannot help them in reaching that carbon neutrality state. But then there are no simple answers. I'm saying that to follow the process of democratization, probably that democratic deliberation in knowledge creation, creation of appropriate technologies, in fact, and creation of appropriate institutions, creation of appropriate governance structure. So all these things will actually help us in actually not reaching that, the gas chamber kind of a condition. So we'll have to follow the process and truly believe in democracy for everything that is required. I think from that, I think we can get answer.
Okay, I think, thank you so much. Thank you so much, sir. Good round of applause, please. Thank you. I would request Devika Kannan, if she is online, then we can have her and listen to what she has to say.
So yeah, I'm here.
Devika
So can you all
Kannan, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. So can you hear my voice?
Yeah, I think we have got her.
So can you hear me? Like
we can't hear you.
Now?
Yeah, we can. Okay, come again.
Yeah, can you hear me clearly now? Like
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, nice. Okay, so I have made some presentation for today. And let me share my screen. So can you see my screen?
We can.
Okay, and is it in the presenter? Can you see the presenter version of the screen?
Yeah, we can see, but it's in presenter mode. You can continue as well, but if you can put it in presentation mode, that would be wonderful.
To do in this way. Yeah. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank IIM Raipur and also especially the organizer of this international conference for inviting me to deliver an inviter talk in the area of circular economy. So for today's presentation, I will be talking about how circular procurement transition can happen in today's business world as a whole journey. So myself, Devika Kannan, I'm the Deputy Director for Center for Sustainable Operations and Resilient Supply Chain, and this center comes under ISER and Adelaide Business School at the University of Adelaide. And this slide shows a little bit about a quick intro about me, where you can see what sort of educational background that I have and then what are the research areas. I know that already a formal introduction has been made, but let me quickly go through some of my introduction slides. So in terms of my research interest mainly focuses on the supply chain, broadly the supply chain context, dealing with the green supply chain, sustainable supply chain, and then the circular supply chain. Along with this, I try to also focus on how we can integrate Industry 4.0 technologies when we try to manage our supply chains. And when it comes to my research area, like my core research area lies in the procurement context, where my focus is mainly on dealing with the green procurement, sustainable and circular procurement. And even in the procurement context, I have started exploring like how we can integrate some of the Industry 4.0 technologies like robot process automation, or how we can use AI or machine learning to deal with the procurement functions. And some of the other research areas, they are listed here. And then in terms of the editorial experience, I have quite some, editorial experience in several journals at the various capacities, starting from the area editor in analysis of OR, and then editor for some of the other journals as well, and also associate editor for cleaner logistics and supply chain. And yeah, the remaining things you can see here. So for today's presentation, like I'm going to follow this agenda. Like I will start with a little bit about the introduction part, like what is the main motivation for, when we want the businesses to move towards the circular economy journey. And then I will try to talk about the SDG tools, like the tools that we have developed in one of our project, mainly to help the organization, mainly in the supply chain focus, when they want to integrate circular economy principles, and by focusing on 4 main domains like procurement, manufacturing, warehousing, and logistics. What sort of practices that they want to know, and what is their maturity level. So we have developed some tools, and I will be showing that. And in particularly, I will be focusing more on the procurement part, because that is my focus for today's presentation. So once I introduce the procurement maturity model, I will be talking a little bit about what sort of transitions that we are having in terms of the procurement focus, like starting from the traditional focus, and now we have landed in the circular procurement focus. And finally, I will conclude my presentation by showing a case validation that we have made mainly for the maturity model that we have made for the circular procurement context. So when we talk about some of the main motivation, like whenever we talk about this procurement or the supply chain context, whenever any disruption happens at any parts of the world, it is going to have a huge impact on the supply chain. And whenever there is some interruption happening at the supply chain, of course, there is a huge change that needs to be done in the procurement functions and their decisions. So as a procurement manager or the supply chain manager, we need to deal with several challenges, like we all know, like very recently, like the COVID pandemic. And then we can also add some of the other incidents like Suez blockage that has happened very recently. And then any sort of disruptions. It could be related to the war between Ukraine or Russia war, or so whenever any disruptions that happens. And also we all talk about some of the environmental challenges as well, like talking about global warming, climate change, and how we can move towards the carbon neutrality and net zero emissions. So the answer for, one way of answering all these challenges is, okay, it's highly important for the business. They want to move towards sustainable or circular economy context. And it's highly important that they need to be more resilient, okay, whenever any disruptions that are going to happen. In addition to these challenges, and we all know about one of the global agenda called UN SDG goals, like how, not just as one nation, but as a whole world, how we can help each other to attain the UN SDGs. So one way, like businesses, that they can help both the nations locally and also globally to move towards this united global agenda of UN SDGs is through by integrating sustainability or circular economy into their functions. And we can also say, like, whenever we want to handle these challenges or moving towards the global or local agenda, and in this digitalized world, like we can say, like the Industry 4.0 technologies, they can help greatly, and we can say that, like, they are also the enabling factors that helps organization to move towards this sustainable journey or the circular economy journey. So here I'm showing you, like, one of the, the SDG toolkit that we have developed from one of the project that we have worked mainly for helping the organizations, how to optimize the circular economy, mainly from the supply chain focus. So in this project, we have 4 main domains, starting from the procurement and then manufacturing, logistics, and warehousing. And I don't go through all the 4 domains, but instead I will just go a little bit deep into the procurement context. So in the next slide, you can see, like, as a result of this SDG toolkit, like we have developed a maturity model, particularly for the procurement context. So in today's business world, like whenever the companies are dealing with a procurement, there is a huge shift that has happened, like, and that has been captured in this maturity model. So in this maturity model, you can see, like, we have developed a model with 10 stages. Like the first 2 stages, they have the focus of a traditional context, and then the 3 and 4 with a green perspective, and 5 and 6 with a sustainable context, and then 7 and 8 with a circular economy focus, and 9 and 10, the final one, the advanced one, which is nothing but combination of sustainability and circular economy focus when it comes to the dealing with procurement functions. So this maturity model has been made based on 2 main elements, like, or the dimensions, like focusing on TBL or circularity perspective, and also the level of integrating Industry 4.0 technologies when we try to deal with several focuses of the procurement. And this is going to help the organization, like, to make the transition from the traditional focus until, what we need to do in order to move towards to address any of the global challenges, or to move towards UN SDG goals, and so on. So whenever an organization wants to move from one stage to another stage, there are several factors that they need to know, like they have to check what are the driving factors, what are all the barriers, and what sort of capabilities are needed. And even if they want to move from one stage to another stage, it's highly important, like what sort of practices are really needed that needs to be implemented, so that the company can integrate the specific procurement in their organization. And when they try to integrate specific practices, then we can also say, like, the technologies, like Industry 4.0 technologies can enable the implementation of these practices, which can help the organization to achieve, the intended level of sustainable practices and also UN SDG goals. So when we try to go a little bit into the maturity model, like when I say, like, there are several focuses, like traditional focus, green, sustainable, circular, and the last final one, it's the sustainable circular context. In each of the focuses, we have also integrated Industry 4.0 technology perspective as well. Like stage 1, the focus will be only on the economic dimension, like without any circularity or without any 4.0 technology integration, whereas stage 2, it is the integration of Industry 4.0 things, but just with the economic dimension. The same way we have based the stage 3 with the green one, where the focus will be on economic and then the environmental dimension. And then in stage 5 and 6, it's a sustainability part, like dealing with economic, environment, and social with no circularity as the focus. And when it comes to the circular procurement context, it's the focus has been shifted from economic, environment, and then the circularity, including the circularity principles, in order to deal with the procurement functions. And as I have mentioned with the other stages, it is, we can also integrate Industry 4.0 technologies that can help the organization to enable these implementation. And at the end, of course, to achieve the intended performances. So having said through the maturity model, like when we look at the transition that has happened in the procurement, starting from the traditional context, traditionally, I mean, the procurement decisions are being made with just with the economic focus, like cost, quality, delivery, flexibility. You can add any sort of economic parameters. So that was one of, only thing that has been focused at the earlier stages of many decades back. But now that's not the case, like as the whole world is moving towards a sustainability or circular economy journey. So slowly we have entered the green dimension. So whenever, the companies, when they try to evaluate their suppliers or products, in addition to the economic, under the green focus, they try to look for other green criteria, like whether how the suppliers are doing in terms of environmental protection, like are they working on any sort of environmental related certifications, and how they are dealing with the pollution control, or how they are dealing with the hazardous management, and how, what sort of materials are being included in the product. So that's a focus has been shifted along with, from the economic focus, now including the green criteria. And following the green procurement, there comes the focus towards a sustainable procurement, where now the procurement decisions need to be made not just based on economic, and it needs to be included with a environmental focus and also the social one. So sustainable procurement is a process where sustainable products are being bought from the sustainable suppliers across the tiers, several tiers in the upstream. And at the same time, it is highly important. We need to consider what our customers are also looking for. So in most of my publications are in the area of sustainable procurement, and one of the recent one that I have made is dealing with a driver analysis for sustainable procurement implementation. Like this is a multiple case study work where I have, where in order to analyze the sustainable procurement implementation for a focal company, it is not just we need to include only the focal company, but we need to check their first tier supplier and also second tier, and as much as tiers as possible, which is going to be a little bit more complex to do, but it's needed when we try to look from sustainable procurement journey. And at the same time, we need to hear the voice of our direct customers as well, because they are the one who is going to get the products what they are going to produce. In general, if we get any push from the direct customers, yes, that is going to be translated into our production, and the upstreams will be reacting to that. So in this work, I have also, dealt with the extended multi-tier theory, like where it's highly important, like not just looking at the focal company level, but looking at the upstream and also the immediate customer level. And then, yeah, this is also another example for supplier selection, where supplier selection under the TBL perspective, we have to evaluate the suppliers based on economic, environment, and social. And in this one, we have considered the critical success factor theory and several stakeholder theory. So more and more factors we want to use when we want to evaluate your suppliers. It's the decision making is going to be a little bit more complex, and where there comes maybe we can integrate some of the Industry 4.0 tools that can, or some sort of algorithms that can help to make these decision making in little bit in a more included manner. And then the next transition, now we have landed in the circular procurement, and we can say circular procurement is an extension version of the sustainable procurement. And in other words, we can also say like a nexus between circular economy principle and dealing with the procurement context, that's a circular procurement. So in a simple term, we can also say like circular procurement is a process where we are not just, it is not needed just to buy the circular products, but it needs to be used in a more circular manner. So we have to keep the products in use either as a product as such, or as at the material level, or at the component level as much as possible, either in the same supply chain or through the other secondary supply chains. So we don't waste any resources so that we will allow the biosphere to regenerate on its own rate. So we can say like circular procurement is a process in which products are being purchased according to the principles of circular economy. So in order to promote that, act of buying the circular product and to keep them in a more circular usage, three elements need to be considered, three important elements. One is the technical aspect of the product needs to be as circular as possible. And we need to take into consideration what sort of policies that we are going to look when it deals with maintenance and return policies at the end of use period. And then we also need to consider financial incentives, okay, because whenever this procurement is going to happen, it needs to be motivated both for the buyer and also the supplier, so that we can make sure that circular usage of product is really guaranteed. So for the circular procurement, really a good collaborative relationship needs to be there, rather than being a more transactional or a short-term one that we normally see in a normal or the classical procurement context. And here comes the most awaited part of my today's presentation. So we have developed, so now, when we try to know, okay, there are several transitions that is happening, and when we want to help the companies how they can integrate circular procurement, and we have come up with a maturity model, and this model can help the organization to see, okay, when they want to move towards circular procurement, what sort of practices that they want to integrate. So that is more important, how we can do that actually. So we have come up with a maturity model with the help of a systematic literature review. As a result of that, we just found nearly 41 practices that has been categorized under 6 dimensions. As you can see here, practices related to the specification definition, and then practices related to the sourcing strategies or collaboration activities, supply-based management, and so on. And across the column, you can also see several levels, okay, depending on how much practices that the company they are implementing or following, then that will determine what is the level of, what is their maturity level in terms of the circular procurement journey. So the first 3 levels, they are the basic, intermediate, and advanced one. They are without the integration of the Industry 4.0 technologies, whereas when we look at the 4th and 5th, it's the digitalization context. When the practices are being implemented with the help of the Industry 4.0 technologies, then then we can say the specific procurement function has increased their maturity. So this model, which has been developed as a result of a systematic literature review, but we have also validated this with 2 of the case companies initially, and these case companies, it's from the Danish context, like company A and company B, and when we were when we were approaching those companies, they had the circular focus and then circular economy focus and sustainability focus, particularly in their procurement function, but they're interested to move, but they were a little bit in doubt, okay, how we need to proceed. So with the help of this model, we just try to capture what are all the current practices that they are doing. The blue one, they try to talk about what are the current practices that the companies they try to do in their procurement function, whereas the orange one, they try to deal with what are the practices that could be relevant for the companies, which they haven't implemented now, but they will be implementing that in the near future. So based on the current practices, what they have implemented and interested to do in near future, a maturity assessment has been made. And in this slide, you can also see what is their maturity level, the overall maturity level of the company A and B in terms of their circular procurement journey. And we can also see what is their maturity level in specific to the specific dimension. Okay, when it comes to the collaborative activities, where are they? In terms of the supply-based management, where are they? Depending on what sort of practices that they have implemented. So this maturity assessment tool can help the organizations to see where they are now and where they want to go. If they want to go further from one stage to another stage, what could be some of the potential drivers or barriers, and what sort of capabilities are needed. And when they are working on specific stages or specific practices, what sort of performance measures that they can be achieved, and how they can impact the achievement of the UN SDGs. So several other things that we have mapped, and this work, it will be soon published because we have submitted our work to the Transportation Research Part E. And that has been under a minor revision. And even though initially we started with 2 case studies, but now, we have also conducted, increased our samples to 3 more, but only thing is the analysis part is yet to be completed, which we will be doing before, that we will be doing in terms of the revision stage. So like the circular procurement maturity model, we have also come up with this maturity model for the sustainable circular procurement context. So the focus will be a little bit shifted, but I mean, the methodology that we have undergone, it is more or less similar. So with the help of this maturity model, we can help the organization to see, okay, what sort of performance measures that they have achieved, and if they want to increase their performance level, and also if they want to increase their commitment towards UN SDGs, then okay, what are all the other practices that they can do which can be benefited not just for them but also locally for their local government, and also at the broader the global level as well. So since this sustainable circular procurement, which is a more advanced one, it is a little bit hard to find companies, but still we try to manage to find one company, and we have found their maturity level as well. So here comes the final results and findings for the both models, like circular procurement and maturity model and sustainable circular maturity model. So when we are approaching our the case studies, I mean, we received really a positive feedback saying that, okay, I mean, initially, even though we have the motivation of moving towards the circular journey through our circular or sustainable journey through our procurement, but most of the companies, even for the large scale companies, even in the developed nations, it was really hard for them to figure out what sort of changes or what sort of practices or strategies that we have to undergo. And a tool like this, it can help them to make that transition a little bit, from one stage to another. And when I say even though we have tested this model in the developed nation, but in future, like we will also be testing this in terms of in a developing nation context as well. So yeah, that's it that I have for today. So questions, I'm happy to answer any of your questions.
Any questions from the audience? Yeah, we have one raised hand. Okay. Before Mike reaches him, thank you very much, Professor Devika Kannan. I'll hand over to him, but before that, let me take this opportunity and ask a question. Right? Thank you so much. We have three practitioners. We are about to listen to the one practitioner from SEVA International. And hundreds of students are listening and who may be interested to understand the research and implications of what we as an academicians do. So let me ask a very cliche question. The organization and enterprise remains the focus of academic research and not the poorest of the poorest. So my question to you is how this, including me, researchers, can we help to reach to the poorest of the poor to benefit from these results, from these discussions? If you can throw light on that, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, being the academic researchers, we try to think a little bit in a higher level, but the main challenge is how we can take this to the reality, to the practitioners. So yes, it's highly important. Like we need to increase the training that we want to give when it comes to, because even though we try to make so many tools and techniques that can guide the organization, but if it needs to be effective, then we need to increase the training and capacity of the people who are actually involved in implementing such practices. So I would say, like, whenever we try to provide some sort of training, and particularly for the managers, when they are in a situation when they want to include that, and for providing that training and to make that knowledge sharing, I would say that huge amount of investment is also needed, and huge amount of resources are also needed. So yeah, even though when we try to deal with the higher agenda as an academic researchers, our duty is not just coming up with the tools, but we need to make this into a more practical one. So that cannot be done alone just by the researcher, but it needs to be backed up by the universities, many of the universities, we can get some sort of fundings where we can develop or train or do the capacity knowledge sharing to the practical people out there in the industries. So, and also if we can get some support from the government, some sort of fundings, so that is quite possible, I would say, but it will take, it's a matter of time, and also it's a matter of investment and where we are. And there are so many driving and hindering factors depending on, okay, where we are and what sort of policies or businesses are there.
Thank you. Thank you. I guess that's what we don't have time. Yeah. Question, please.
Yeah, am I audible now? So good afternoon, panelists. My name is Vanshika Bansal. And as ma'am talked about the procurement model, so I want to ask what are the main advantages of the circular procurement maturity model as compared to the traditional procurement model?
Okay, so when we talk about the circular procurement, let me try to clarify what is the clear difference between traditional procurement, like when we look at the classical procurement, the products are being bought or the services are being bought just with the focus of economic aspect, like buyer want to pay less, whereas when we try to look at the profit generation, it needs to happen at the both end. But we never think about, okay, what will happen when the products are being used and whether it is going to be ended up in a waste. Mostly in a traditional procurement context, after the use of the particular product, it will be dumped as a waste. But whereas in a circular procurement context, as I mentioned in my presentation, like it's an act of not just buying the circular product, but how we are going to keep that product in use even after the end of its functional life. How we are going to use that product as a product as such, or are we going to use in from the material level or at the component level? What sort of new life that we are going to give at any of these? So that is the main change. Like the traditional procurement is just pay the money, try to buy the things, use it, and just dispose it, which is not good for money perspective and also for the environment. But whereas in a circular procurement context, try to buy the products that can have a long life, and that can also be used as a product as such. As I mentioned, like the main motto is buying circular products and keep that in a circular usage, maximize the intensity and frequency of using that, so that we try to minimize the waste and maximize the value that we are going to get out of the resources that we have spent on producing the product. So so this is the fine difference between the traditional procurement and then the circular procurement. And when it comes to the maturity model, there is changes as well. Like we try to add the complexity of not just economic dimension. We try to include the environmental one and also circular focus. Smart contracts needs to be made, and smart circular contracts needs to be made. So by including those focuses, we need to integrate several practices. So that will make the difference between the traditional procurement. Even though I have shown the maturity model for circular procurement, there is a separate maturity model that we have developed for the traditional one. Yeah. So when you try to see the both, then you can see what sort of differences that you can have.
Okay, we have room for one question. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Professor Devika. Can we have a big round of applause for her?
Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you.
Now I'd request Shri R.K. Anilji to present his views on the conference theme, regenerative ecosystem, or whatever his experience is related to that. You have 15 minutes, and then we can have a question and answer.
Should this be here? इसकी आवश्यकता है क्या? रहेगा? Okay. Yep. Johar. No response? Yeah. See, you are all from the ChatGPT, AI, ML, and so on and so forth generation. Is there anything that you don't know? which you want to hear from me? Frankly, given an opportunity, I mean, even the ChatGPT thing might say, I mean, R.K. Anil, kuch likh dijiye, kuch to aayega usme. Isn't it? Okay. I mean, I'll be sharing a few, not necessarily experiences, but some sort of a thing related to all of us. In the sense that those of us who are sitting in this room, we comprise perhaps the top maybe 0.0005% of the country. We are the elite, isn't it? One way or the other. Either by education or by income or by social status or by any other parameter. So what is it that our education will do for us? आप लोग इतना मेहनत करके कैट क्लियर करके यहाँ पर आए, and our future is more or less assured. There's no doubt about it, unless we screw it up ourselves. So what is it that IIM does for you, or whatever my institutions must have done for me? Any guesses? Apart from imparting you whatever knowledge that they try to over a 2-year period, or that they tried doing with me long ago, they give us an ecosystem, isn't it? Education is only incidental. After we graduate from here in another 1.5 years or so, we'll be a part of a network. And then that's where the game begins. Okay, in this context, shall I ask you something? After you graduate, maybe the hottest thing these days is what? Investment banking or consulting? One of them perhaps. So, assuming you get a job, say in Geneva or Paris or wherever, and then assuming a rickshaw puller comes from Dhamtari to Naya Raipur. Dhamtari is just down the road. 30 kilometer agar niche jaoge to Dhamtari milega. What is common between us? The rickshaw puller coming for the first time to Dhamtari and you going on your new assignment to Paris. Is there anything in common? Whom do we rely on? Whom does he rely on when he comes here or when we go somewhere else? In spite of our degree, in spite of all the money, in spite of my father's whatever status, I still rely on my network, isn't it? We write to alumni saying that Paris में कौन-कौन है, मुझे घर कौन दिलाएगा, मुझे फलाना नौकरी वहाँ है, वो है, ये है, and all that. Or when we switch jobs, or when we are doing some other thing, it's all about the network that we have, which basically in jargon is social capital. And the rickshaw puller from Dhamtari also does the same when he comes to Naya Raipur. He looks for whom does he know? Who can help him? Somebody from his caste, somebody from his background, somebody who can get a rickshaw or an auto rickshaw for him to hire, somebody who can stand surety for him, somebody who can say where the opportunities lie, and so on and so forth. After about 1.5 hours, we heard the word poor and the poorest in this session. So that's what I am talking about. What is it in it for you? Yes, Abhi, you got the hint of what I was trying to allude to. So what is in it for you? I mean, you are not here to alleviate the poverty or anything, isn't it? We are here to become business managers. So if that is the case, what is in it for us? Any guesses? Some of those things were discussed earlier by the other panelists. They said we are all in it together. Something called enlightened self-interest. Even if you are a businessman, you want somebody to buy your goods and services, isn't it? That's where people cannot be too poor for you, that they can't afford to buy your stuff. That's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is, 2 of the panelists mentioned 2 districts in Bastar. Bijapur and Sukma, which are hotbeds of one particular variety of getting things resolved or trying to resolve in a particular way. So that's a purely negative way of doing things. What else is in it for us? Because whatever you are studying to manage resources, the same things can be applied for improvement of social indicators that R.K. Singh ji said, improvement of child-focused, climate change-related stuff that Shweta ji said. Are you up to it? I mean, it's too early for you because you are perhaps just in your second semester or something. But after you clear all your courses, you are thorough with your marketing, you are thorough with your project management, you are thorough with your finance and all that. You can apply the same tools and techniques if you wish to, because there are worthy examples of a few IIM alum who have done exceedingly well for the country in a different sector altogether, whether it is social entrepreneurship, whether it is microfinance, whether it is augmenting social capital for the poor and aggregating them into something, and so on and so forth. But are we up to it? That is what. So in this context, I'll just list out a few things. Uske baad aap dekh lijiye where it fits or where you fit. One of it is, I mean, at some point or the other, you might have heard or read in passing or overheard on the TV or whatever that there are these many hundreds and thousands of women self-help groups. सुने होंगे कभी या पढ़े होंगे कहीं कुछ हो रहा होगा ऐसे. हाँ, और आप अगर किसी गांव से है तो हो सकता है कहीं मिले भी होंगे किसी से. Okay, so that is about what is it that we are trying to do out there. We're just trying to augment their social capital, help them do something so that they can self-help. That was supposed to be the thing, but it ultimately turned out to something more narrower. Maybe only the savings part is being highlighted, only the loans part are being highlighted, and then they have become a conduit for something. Nevertheless, it's a way of doing things. Those of you who might have heard of farmer producer companies, 10,000 of them are now being promoted by Government of India, which was announced by the finance minister, perhaps in the budget last year. So it's a huge thing for us. It is the same thing, augmenting social capital of the farmers and ensuring that their business thrives. All said and done, cooperation is a private business, but with a different law and with a different set of values. You can even work there. And there are a lot of issues that plague both the SHGs and the cooperatives and the companies. But the deal is the same. I'm sure some of you must have, I mean, not only heard of Amul, but also must be eating Amul ice creams. Isn't it? It's a cooperative, which is a turnover of about 50,000 crores or something per year. Perhaps world's second largest or the largest milk company or dairying company or whatever. So it is all about small farmers who just have maybe a couple of buffaloes or 3 buffaloes and so on and so forth, because that is how the dairying is there in Gujarat. Those of Professor Chawda, I mean, I'm sure he would know. So that's one example, and you could come up with plenty other things in the country. वो एक चीज था. दूसरा, how many of you have heard of somebody called Bindeshwar Pathak in the recent past? पिछले 1-2 महीने में गलती से. Okay, forget about Bindeshwar Pathak. I'm sure some of you must have at least seen Sulabh Sauchalais in the railway stations or in urban areas and wherever. And the work which he happened to have done for sanitation. This was even before Modi ji's splendid program of Swachh Bharat. So that's about social entrepreneurship, wherein the focus is not only on optics and metrics, on eyeballs and footballs, but on the vision that you have and the revenue model that goes with it. Without sacrificing either of them, you would like to, somebody said purpose in this session somewhere. Where does the purpose come in? So purpose is in the focus, and then it won't be purely funded by grants or doles or any of those things, but you'll have a solid revenue model backing it. And that's where perhaps all your financial skills will come in. Somebody was saying climate finance kya hai? Usi prakar se, there is this finance thing plaguing all sorts of social enterprises. We did a study 4 years ago of agriculture social enterprises, agriculture based ones. There's a book that has come, maybe it's in the library also. I have one of my case studies in that. It's called Farming Futures. It has about 15 case studies of agriculture based brick and mortar social enterprises and all the ills that they have perhaps overcome or still in the process of overcoming at that point of time. So there is a lot that's happening in social enterprises, but they don't have the ecosystem asset. That was one of the things that we figured out, at least at that point of time, 4 years ago. So maybe things must have improved now, and maybe you can do more there if you wish to. So there's another opportunity of picking up a social cause. It could be climate change, it could be child focus something, or it could be any of the things that the earlier panelists mentioned, or any of that which catches your fancy. Any social cause for which as of now neither civil society nor the government is able to address in a meaningful way. अगर आपको लगता है, बहुत सारे हैं देश में ऐसे मुद्दे, आप ले सकते हैं and then try it out as a challenge. वो एक था. Other one that we are trying out is, I'm sure some of you must have heard of, say, somebody called Anna Hazare. Okay, वो गलती से, क्योंकि पहले तो नहीं सुने थे, बाद में जब दिल्ली आगे वो धरना वरना करने लग जाए, पेपर में आ गए, तो फिर सुने हम. तो Anna Hazare is a social leader, as we say, one who works at the grassroots, trying to address issues that affect people directly on the ground. It could be how he transformed his own village. Anybody from Maharashtra, Nagar and all those areas must have visited his village also. Ho sakta hai. And then how it became a revolution in rural development a few years ago before he came into anti-corruption thing. So what we are trying to do is, leadership, as your professors must have taught you, is what? Is it born or made? Are leaders born or are they made? Perhaps we still believe that they can be made. Maybe some of them are born. So if you think that they can be made, and if you think that even you can become a leader, perhaps you can. And transform or provide transformational development and transformational solutions to any of those issues which you would like to address. So what we are doing in that context is, leadership is difficult to come by. That's what we have observed. But for youth, there are many fellowship programs these days available, isn't it? You must have heard of some of them. Some of them are supported by Niti Aayog, some of them by State Bank of India, some of them by Piramals and whoever. So we have also started a small Seva fellowship sort of a thing, wherein the organization that I work for, Seva International, is a diaspora organization. People of Indian origin are there in plenty of countries, and in about 30 of them, people have come together in their own countries to do something for their own host country in which now they are living, apart from doing something for the motherland. So that's the organization that I work for. And then apart from various other things that we do, we have also started this fellowship, in which we are trying to nurture social leaders. So there's another thing that you can do. Either you can become yourself one, or you can work for any of these things and nurture others, wherein you will help them over a period of time, maybe an year or two, and then gradually they'll pick up the ropes and then work for themselves. वो एक है. And another important thing as business managers that you'll definitely come across is something called corporate social responsibility. I'm sure you must have all heard of it, isn't it? So India is perhaps one of the few countries which has a mandatory law. I mean, although I'm not in favor of it, I was heading one of them. I believe it's a tax, unnecessary tax on the business. But nevertheless, it's there now on the books. So some of you, when you go up to those positions, maybe in about 10 or 20 years' time, you will have opportunities to make use of the fund available in your businesses to work on some of those issues listed out, on which your company can spend the monies and bring about some development. So how do you go about that? And there are plenty of issues plaguing CSR. there's plenty of literature you must have come across, or you can perhaps pick up. There is a lot of criticism. How myopic it is, how infrastructure focused is it, and how it's there only in a few well-off states in the country. How iniquitous is it, and vagara vagara. So there is a lot that you can do to improve it. Again, using the same business skills that you will acquire over the next 1.5 years. So these are all the challenges that you can take up to work for a very large section of population in India. Actually, मैं कुछ और बात करने आया था. I just realized, but then हुआ क्या है कि I'll also be there in the valedictory. So those of you who will be unfortunate enough to be there will get to listen something else about the ecosystem and the regenerative thing, on where I failed in the past, and so on and so forth. Thank you very much. देखो भाई, अगर किसी को क्वेश्चन पूछना है तो पूछ लो, but don't expect any great answers from me. Okay, we'll discuss and we'll explore, because I can only give you whatever my perception or my thing is, which need not be really true. So, okay, now it's up to you.
Thank you, sir. Questions, please.
Nope.
Good evening, sir. Sir, I'm Nishma from PGP batch 2325. Sir, you said that leaders are made, and you also mentioned about the FPCs, farmer producer companies. So, sir, in farmer producer companies, the directors, the board members are farmers themselves. So, how do you think that farmers will run the company as in a business perspective? What's your say on that?
I fully agree with you, and also not agree with you, in the sense that we were fortunate enough to be at the Institute of Rural Management at Anand when Dr. Kurian was alive. So, as some of you must know, would know that there have been two great rural revolutions in the country, the green and the white. So, Dr. Kurian was responsible in a way, to a large extent, to bring about the white revolution in the country, about the milk production. तो वो अक्सर कहते थे कि I am proud to be an employee of the farmers, because when he used to head the Gujarat Cooperative Milk Marketing Federation, the company that owns the Amul brand, so he used to be its whatever, and then he often used to address us once in a while and then claim that he is proud to being one. वो एक था. दूसरा एक है, incidentally, I long ago made the preliminary draft of these FPCs a few years ago, and then but now it has got thoroughly modified, that policy. तो अभी वर्तमान में आप जो कह रहे हैं वो सही है, क्योंकि there are two issues which are very critical in any of these cooperatives or companies. One is the business plans that they have, and the other is the governance. So governance again is about who takes decisions. So it's a promoter organization that actually promotes a cooperative or a FPC. So it's their responsibility, whoever is a promoter, it could be a civil society organization, or it could be a university, or a Krishi Vigyan Kendra, or whoever. These days everybody is promoting farmer producer companies. But whoever it is, it's their responsibility also to nurture these leaders. All those directors and secretaries or whoever will run the show, handhold the whole process for a while, and then gradually transfer it to them. But then can this be done? क्योंकि both of them go simultaneously. एक तो उनका business भी augment करवाना है, whatever 3-year period or 5-year period that they handhold that particular cooperative, and साथ में they also have to nurture this leadership into elections, membership, and so on and so forth. And there are, I don't know if you have a course on that, but then there are issues related to running collective businesses. There is something called elite capture, there is something called whatever. So there are plenty of issues you think of, they are there. Because finding human resources for these cooperatives and companies, producer companies, is a major issue now. Because each of them will have to be headed by somebody called a CEO or whoever. But then can that guy be found in the small tehsils and blocks and wherever they are. So can that guy really be good to lead these businesses on behalf of those maybe literate or semi-literate, in some cases, purely women cooperatives or companies? So these are all the issues. So that is where there are some very good examples in the country from which we can learn how these things have been done and how these things are still being done. But it requires a lot of thought behind this. But all those issues are still there, let me assure you. So if you intend to promote any of these things, you will have plenty of work for you. That's what I can assure you, Nimsha. Yep.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We would now like to thank the panelists and the moderator for an enriching and enlightening sessions. All of you, please give a huge round of applause for them. We also thank the audience for their enthusiastic participation. On behalf of IIM Raipur, now we'd like to felicitate our esteemed panelists.
I request Professor S. Ramkumar to felicitate Mr. R.K. Anil and Mr. R.K. Singh with a memento. I now request Professor Shantanu to felicitate Ms. Shweta and Professor Mrunal. I now request the dignitaries to proceed to the first floor for a short tea break. I request the students to remain seated while the dignitaries leave.
The students validation will start 4:20, 10 minutes.
Okay.
Right.
No.
The tea break is only for 10 minutes. Students are requested to return to the auditorium in 10 minutes.
4:25.
By 4:25. Everyone is requested to report to the auditorium sharp at 4:25. The valedictory session will start sharp at 4:25. Thank you.
Laptop you had given, that's why I was trying to call you.
वो मैम ने ले लिया वापस।
वो दे दिया ना।
Okay, I'll bring directly. Everything is
Can you just 10 minutes?
अभी इसमें नहीं है ज्ञान वर्षा में तो दिन पे लोगों ने डाला था भरत लाल आपके पास ही रखो बाद में फिर एक रखो ओ ये चेंज करके पड़ी
Notepads, not my pad. I think.
Oh.
तो यही पे बस बस स्पीकर्स को लगेंगे तो भाई
इधर साइड पे कर देता हूँ
बस स्पीकर्स को लगे सभी
First को लगे।
Hello, hello.
Students are requested to please be seated as soon as possible. We are going to get started with the valedictory session.
Ask your friends to come back.
And students, kindly ask your friends to come inside as well. The volunteers and the CRs kindly ensure that all the students are in the auditorium and not outside. CRs and volunteers kindly ensure that all the students are inside. Students are requested to please be seated. We're going to start soon. Students are requested to please be seated.
Students are requested to please be seated.
We kindly request all the guests to come on the stage, all the dignitaries.
Greetings, esteemed guests, faculty members, scholars, and fellow environmental enthusiasts.
I, Divyam Agarwal,
I, Lori Surana,
from PGP Batch 2325, welcome you to the valedictory session of the two-day international conference on regenerative ecosystems. Since yesterday, we have been having some amazing discussions on regenerative ecosystem on the momentous occasion hosted by the Indian Institute of Management.
regenerative ecosystem offer a beacon of hope, promising a future where we not only restore our planet's natural beauty, but also foster a harmonious coexistence between humans and nature. We have delved in a fascinating world of regenerative ecosystems, exploring their potential to transform our relationship with the environment. We heard from renowned experts, engaged in thought provoking discussions, and witnessed inspiring case studies that demonstrated the power of a regenerative ecosystem. Now, I would like to take the honor to welcome Sri Anil Kumar Rai, IFS. Sir is the Managing Director of Chhattisgarh State Minor Forest Produce Cooperative Federation Limited under the Department Trading and Development. With a round of applause, please join me in extending a warm welcome to Sri Anil Kumar Rai.
Next.
I would request Dr. Ram Kumar Kakani, Director, IIM Raipur, to welcome our guest with a bouquet. Thank you, sir.
It is my honor to welcome Sri R.K. Anil, Executive Director, Seva International, to our today's session. He has worked as CEO of National Mineral Development Corporation, CSR Foundation, has worked in the rural community development sector for the past 2 decades with various organizations, including grassroots NGOs in Rajasthan and Telangana. World Bank supported poverty elevation programs in Andhra Pradesh and Chhattisgarh, and with United Nations Development Program across the country. Had also worked as an engineer with Steel Authority of India Limited and taught at Development Management Institute. He studied engineering and science in BITS Pilani and rural management in Institute of Rural Management, Anand. Sir, we welcome you to our today's session.
Kindly join us in welcoming Professor Amar KJR Nayak, Professor of Strategic Management at Xavier Institute of Management, Bhubaneswar, where he has been a faculty member for over 30 years. He had been the NABARD Chair Professor for 2 terms and is now the Chairperson of the Center for Sustainable Ecological System at XIMB. Professor Nayak engages in research, teaching, and policy advice on transition strategies to facilitate building sustainable ecological system. He has published extensively in these areas and is a respected voice in the academic community. He is also a recipient of numerous awards and honors, including the prestigious Emerald Literary Network Award for Outstanding Paper in 2013 and 2014. We welcome you, sir.
Now I would request Sri Anil Kumar Rai, IFS, to take the podium and share his thoughts.
Good evening, dignitaries on the dais, Professor Kakani, all the delegates and dear students. Indeed, it is a great privilege and honor for me to be among the distinguished delegates of present in this conference. Firstly, I would put a disclaimer that I am not an ecologist. I am not an economist. I am a most hated person in this country, a bureaucrat. I would congratulate Professor Kakani for organizing a very important organizing a symposium on the most critical and important aspect faced by not only our country, but also the world over. We all know that we are over-consuming our natural resources. And not only over-consuming so massively that we may end up with a degraded ecosystem in and around us. We recognize that bringing about the scale of change required to meet the climate and biodiversity crisis is very much needed at this moment. And it's very timely. The economists have started thinking about regenerative ecosystems. Unless you maintain the ecosystem, no economy can survive. Sustainability has been a key word in the past decades, that if we have sustainable ecosystems, we can survive. But what is sustainability? With increasing population, increasing greed, increasing need for natural resources, sustainability has no meaning in the present time. The other word has been neutrality. Can we really have neutrality with regard to ecosystems? I think no. Because as I explained, the population, the need, the greed is endless. So having a neutral ecosystem, a neutral consumption from our ecosystem is also not possible. Then what should we do? Either we can restore our ecosystem and have a conscious approach in exploitation of ecosystem so that resources are preserved. In doing so, what the economist will get? A higher cost of production, maybe a greater demand for few items, not all, but few items. But can all the population sustain that higher production cost and the demand, the unbalanced demand of certain resources? I think no. In that case, what is the answer? I really don't know. And whether it is a regenerative ecosystem or a normal ecosystem or overexploited ecosystem, what will work in present day, I have no answers. And these symposiums where you people have gathered together and discussed, and I'm glad that many future entrepreneurs as well as managers are here and participating in these workshops. Definitely something will come out. And that is the hope we all have, the society, the bureaucracy, the political leadership, the country, and I think the world. And these challenges are to be discussed and some solution. Not everything cannot be solved and we cannot have a perfect system. But I think something will come out which will in longer run benefit all the human beings. With these words, I end my thoughts. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for enlightening us with your knowledge and experience.
Moving further, I would like to request Shri R.K. Anil to share his views with the audience.
Namaskar. Let me tell you a different story this time in the next 5 minutes. I think I have failed both the ecosystems of which I was a part of, well-designed ecosystems in my higher education. All my friends who benefited from the engineering education have gone over to graze on the greener pastures across the Atlantic. And then quite a few of my friends who were supposed to be working in rural areas have also moved on to something else. So in spite of having a very well-designed ecosystem that was supposed to address a particular solution of the country, didn't really yield results. So that's the disclaimer about the ecosystems. And I've had a very fascinating experience today morning listening to quite a few of those papers that were presented, touching upon various subjects which I was not aware of earlier. So thank you very much for exposing me to them. I'll give you 3 examples from my work, wherein the role that ecosystem had played or not played into ensuring their sustainability and maybe also replenishing or the regenerative part of it was also being taken care of. As some of you must have been reading or maybe aware of at some point of time, there is this thing called irrigation, which actually is perhaps a constraint to our growth in agriculture sector, lack of irrigation. So to mitigate that, especially in rain shadow regions and the ones that are dependent on monsoons, there is this thing called watershed management. It is about harvesting rainwater so that the farmers can take a second crop and so on and so forth. Most of the projects in India have failed, and India has invested heavily in them. Most of them are not sustainable. As Anil Kumarji was saying, sustainability is something that is not there in most of them. Not because they didn't have the ecosystem that was required for that. Not because the policy was inadequate. Policy was the same everywhere. Only a few succeeded. Why? What was it that differentiated those few successes from similar others which didn't sustain for a long time? I'll give you one example. Recently, I was in Jhabua in Madhya Pradesh. It's a Bhil-dominated tribal area bordering Gujarat. And what I heard from the tribals was, it is a water deficient area, but then they were on a campaign to dig something like 3,000 tanks, water tanks, voluntarily as a movement. But then they were not claiming that they were trying to harvest water for themselves. What they were drawing sustenance was from their scriptures, from their tradition, saying that हम धरती माँ का प्यास बुझाने के लिए ये तालाब खोद रहे हैं. So that's the value that they had. They had a higher purpose for what they were trying to do. So that is what was yielding results for them. So they were not looking, inadvertently they might also benefit. But the higher purpose was this selfless thing that they were doing for a larger purpose for the environment and for themselves, maybe later on. वो एक था, and इसीलिए it's successful. I interacted with them. I was there for a few days. I'll give you one more example. Quite a few of you must be aware that these days, organic farming is a big thing in India. Organic products, chemical pesticides, how contaminated the food is, how harmful the food is, you're all aware of it. But why is it not that most organic farming projects are taking off? I was also involved in designing some of them in Telangana, with the NGO that I used to volunteer, and we overwhelmingly failed. We withdrew our project in 2 years because farmers who reluctantly joined at the beginning, they went off in the second year. In spite of all the promises that we made, in spite of all the ecosystem that we created, into giving them inputs, buying their outputs, helping them in training and capacity building, and so on and so forth. But it didn't work. And that's the predominant story across the country, in spite of all the efforts that are being made to promote organic farming in the country as of now. On the other hand, I was in Rajasthan a few months ago working for another NGO. There, overwhelmingly in the Thar desert, the farmers were coming forward because they thought that it is their duty to sort of decontaminate Mother Earth. Again, it's the same value proposition that we're bringing in, which we could not by giving all the incentives that we could in other areas. So what is it that motivates people in spite of not having an adequate ecosystem or having an adequate ecosystem? So that is what they're drawing from somewhere else. And a third example in which I was involved myself, I used to run this thing called community-based rural tourism. We, when I was in UNDP long ago, we brought that concept to the country, and then we piloted quite a few projects across the country. Naturally, as you must have thought by now, quite a few of them failed. But then a few succeeded. And wherever they succeeded, the reason was that the community took pride in their traditions and culture, and they didn't change. Their offering to the guest was the same as they would for their own relatives. So unless you instill that pride in the community on their traditions and culture, they're not going to be there for a long time. They're going to go astray and then take a different route from what you had envisaged. So whatever you do, if you don't factor in this idea of values that are so dear to them, you will not be able to really bring about a sustainable change. And finally, what is the criticism that I wanted to make? Let me see. We all talk about learning in silos, and especially, I'll just read out what I wrote. Focusing on win-win instead of a win-lose in our education, especially in professional education such as management, architecture, engineering, medicine, law, and so on and so forth. And integrating ethics focused on our dharma in the curriculum. I hope you have a course on ethics in management. At least we had as a mandatory course. So hopefully that will perhaps to some extent mitigate the damage that we will do in our course over the next 30 or 40 years of our professional life. So that's one of the things that the country needs, and that's where we all will come into picture. Thank you very much. All the best for you.
Thank you, sir, for sharing your knowledge. We are sure it will be beneficial for all of us in the upcoming future.
Now, we would like to invite Dr. Ramkumar Kakani, Director, IIM Raipur, to share his remarks.
There was a boy who would eat jalebis, samosas, and everything. And he slowly grew up to my size. Then for the next 10 years, he ate a little more and then become twice my size. And then at the age of, let's say, 45, 50, he suddenly realizes that natural resources have been overconsumed. And he decides to find ways to reduce or, let's say, come out of that sin which is there. And which is where I would be honest in saying my generation of people possibly are doing in this room. Right? So I agree with Anil Kumar Rai sir's suggestion that, look, you can't suddenly transform yourself into Ramdev Baba of Patanjali and do that exercise, this exercise with that much of weight and transform yourself saying, look, I have done something I have restored nature and done sustainability. I also agree with Anil's suggestion that, look, you can't do things like take the person on the table and operate and do something out of the blue and say that, look, I've been very successful. Look, the person is now lean, mean, and everything is good out there. I also agree that there are those other ways of intervention with. So finally, I think, however, when we debate, discuss all these things in a conference of this level, size, shape, a few of these things fall into us policies. Yeah, it's saying quickly close it. So, point is, when we debate, discuss all these things, what happens is it results in certain amount of awareness, and it may result in enough amount of controls and evolving of the knowledge base and resulting in improvements in us. And in that sense, this conference is highly meaningful, and I can only say that thank you so much, Professor Rajiv, Professor Daniel, and Professor Amar Nayak, and of course our sponsors, Chhattisgarh Minor Forests Produce, UNICEF, and NABARD. Without that support which each one of you have done, and of course, most important thing, I want to acknowledge the support of the faculty colleagues, staff, and my students out there, you can say what I call as raw diamonds, who've been kind of listening patiently and taking notes in that sense. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. It is always great listening to you.
As we progress further, I would request Professor Amar KJR Nayak to share some words of wisdom with the students of our institute.
Once again, it's a great privilege. Good evening to all of you. I have many interesting things to share with you, some joyful feelings of these last 3 days. And to begin with, I learned several things in these last 3 days. We had a first day of workshop on system science, and then we had the 2 days of this conference on regenerative ecosystems. The first learning and first joy is what I recall in the last, the two aspects of the conference was regenerativeness and ecosystems. So a lot of learning for me. And one of them I'd like to first share is the first clap, impromptu clap that all of you gave in the cultural evening yesterday. Do you remember when you clapped impromptu? You were not prompted, but all of you clapped. You remember that scene when you clapped? That is symmetry making, right? Symmetry happening naturally. And that's what you loved. And you all clapped because they were dancing so beautifully. And there was a symmetry that you did see. And different, a different actor there was in symmetry with the other. And that's regenerativeness. So how to establish that kind of symmetry naturally is what. So there is a lot of, you can relate. So I thought the student group was quite ahead in terms of bringing the essence to the stage. So that is the first thing. So great for that. Let's give a big round of applause for you. The second surprise and pleasant surprise was I did find a good group of professors who also have this interest in systems thinking and systems science. And I was very happy to discover that in this campus. So I'm sure they will put it up together to take it forward. Yeah, please give a big round of applause. Well, that's the potential nucleus that we have. But the second part of the conference was ecosystem. So the issue of boundaries. What is the boundary to think of when you think of ecosystems? Because it can be, subatomic level to cosmic level. So what's the ecosystem that we refer to? Of course, we say rural ecosystem, industrial ecosystems, or urban ecosystems, or natural ecosystems, or indigenous ecosystems. But what is the boundary which can be studied as an optimal unit where you can see actually all these dimensions of the tracks of the conference operate? And how do you actually synthesize and bring in that symmetry? You want to understand more of that symmetry? Look at physics, dissipating forces and symmetric processes, and how nature really operates. So that's a beautiful area to look into. And I'm sure with these bright minds here, it'll be an interesting area to look for. So thank you so much for this learning opportunity, Professor Ram and the team, Professors, both the coordinators of the conference. It was wonderful. And there's, of course, a lot of backup to this team among the faculty colleagues. So thank you so much for that. And some of my observations is that regenerativeness, as I saw during the conference, is more understood. These are my comments. More understood or taken up as a vocabulary. But that itself is a success. It has come into the vocabulary. But this vocabulary is very loosely being used. We're mostly repackaging the existing practices with the name called regenerativeness. It's a fashionable word to use sustainability, and then now it's a new fashion to use regenerativeness. So we must recognize this. While the good part is we have got this into the vocabulary, but the second part is we are just repackaging. And it's just not in a normal language, but it's also in the articles that I saw, the presentations that I saw. Most of the articles are basically writing whatever they want to write under the name of regenerativeness. So there's a lot of work that is required to really understand this subject and to make it. And if you recall in the first round, they said regenerativeness is nothing moral about it. It is about a level of performance. It's a higher level of performance. From efficiency, a higher level of efficiency is effectiveness, and higher level of efficiency to effectiveness is sustainability, and a higher level of efficiency to sustainability is regenerativeness. And the last level that we would all like to dream for is a flourishing state. So it is a level of, is a very, very high level of performance. So business students, it is not it's not a social, it's not a leftist, it's not a morality, it's not a value or ethics. These are all could be true, but it's more important. This actually is about very, very high levels of efficiency. So from that point of view, we have to go from vocabulary to actually understand the science of it. So that's the one comment that, and the main comment that, and one of the challenges that we heard in the first session on the first day of the conference was the main challenge is the inability to distinguish the boundaries of I and we. The boundaries of I has to merge and get to we. And that's what Anilji was talking about, community, community, community. It's not about the boundary of I, but it's the boundaries that has to expand to consider the we. So this is what you heard in the first session of two colleagues speaking from Spain and UK, and they brought this out. The main challenge is we're not able to break through the boundary of I, and business schools are all oriented to I. Shareholders. We're now talking about stakeholders. So how to really bring this together, and what's the science to actually explain that is the conference about. And so therefore the words that one can take forward to help us understand this is, for students, can simply think in terms of, to begin with, we can think in terms of holistic diagnosis of problems and holistic solutions to the problems. That's one way, one level of trying to understand this. The second way of understanding, a more scientific way of understanding, is a systems science to diagnosis and a systems science to solutions, or a system strategy, not a firm level, unit level strategy. Unit level strategy is necessary. We've done that for the last 300 years, since the days of industrialization. Now the new time has come to look at systems level strategy using system science, but that is not possible without understanding the common currency across the disciplines. So that's when you come to end up to call transdisciplinary research. And that's where we are not able to meet convergence because we don't understand the power of this integration. We are, locked up into our departmental ways of working. So that's the for research it is transdisciplinary, for practice it is convergence. But this has to be based on systems thinking and systems dynamics and systems science. So that's broadly the aspects. But going forward, we of course are planning for the next conference in one of the IIMs. Let's see how we will come back to you and let you know. Second is we are opening up membership for scholars and students. We will be sharing that to the System Science Society, India-based. There are a number of such societies across the world, but we'd like to have one. So we'll see how the interested students as well as scholars can be part of that. And the third, of course, we'd like to start a journal of systems science, and we will come back to you on that as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir, for your insightful words. Now, we invite Ms. Lavanya to receive the Best Doctoral Student Paper Award. I request Dr. Ramkumar Kakani, sir, and also our guest, Shri R.K. Anil, to hand over the certificate. She has been awarded as the Best Doctoral Student Paper Award. Further, we invite Ms. Shubham Jha and Mr. Om Prakash Jha for Best Paper Award. I request our guest, Shri Anil Kumar Rai and Director Sir to hand over the award. Can we have a huge round of applause for them?
Now I would request Dr. Ramkumar Kakani to honor our guest, Shri Anil Kumar Rai, with a memento. Thank you, sir.
We thank all the esteemed guests for sharing their thoughts and views with us today. Now, we would like to call upon Professor J. Daniel Inbaraj, Assistant Professor Marketing, to give a vote of thanks to all present here.
Good evening, all. As we draw close to the International Conference on Regenerative Ecosystems last 2 days, I stand here to deliver the vote of thanks on behalf of Professor Rajiv and myself. We stand here with deepest gratitude for the immense support, and this conference is a collective effort of all my faculty members who I have reached out to be a track chair, reached out to be reviewers, reached out to be moderators. We have due to shortage of time, I'm not naming anyone. So faculty members in organizing committee, it was a wonderful support by my colleague friends who have stood together with me and Raju for this great success of this event. I would like to express my deepest gratitude to our director, whose vision and leadership has been guiding light to all our endeavors, because we used to reach out to director for every requirement of this conference without any time. So thank you, sir. Thank you for being. And I thank Professor Amar Naik, sir, member advisory committee. So because being handholded every step throughout the preparation of this conference. And I thank our CEO, sir, and I thank the travel desk, Mr. Deepak, Prem, because this event has been immensely coordinated on time by the complete support staff headed by our CEO, sir. So, and I finally thank our academic associates, Suman, Milan, Urvasi, Preetham, and Nasser, who have been stepped out to this occasion to help us in all front of this conference. And finally, my students, the students team led by Deepak and Deria. And I extend my heartfelt thanks to all my student committees, whether it is Pixel, MPR, or it is the IT committee, everyone who had reached out. I just requested the run committee. It was all request has been greatly appreciated, and students have stepped in forward to help us throughout this conference. And my final thanks to Professor Jitesh and Priyank Mishra, System Manager, whom we started this conference with 5 months before with our website. So it was throughout the guidance of Jitesh and Priyank Mishra, we have been on warfront whenever we have went back to all the requests for this conference. Thank you. And I thank Almighty God for bringing all my participants safe and all the good goings of this conference. Thank you. Once again, I thank you all. Thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, sir. As we conclude this enriching conference, let us carry with us the knowledge, inspiration, and commitment to action that we have gained. We stand on the threshold of a transformative era where regenerative ecosystems hold the key to a sustainable future.
Let's remember that the time for action is now, and the knowledge gained here inspires us on our way forward. Let's promise to incorporate within us the awareness and intention required to bring about a positive change. As we draw the curtains of this two-day international conference, we, on the behalf of entire IIM Raipur, extend our deepest gratitude to all those present here and to all the participants for the session.
Thank you to all the participants, speakers, and the organizers for making this conference a resounding success. Together, we can regenerate our ecosystem, our economies, and our very way of life. Thank you. And now, I would request everyone to please stand up for the national anthem.
उच्छल जलधि तरंगा तब शुभ नामे जागे तब शुभ आशीष मांगे गागे तब जय गाथा जड़ गण मंगल जय भाग्य विधाता जय 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 हे
Students, kindly be seated. Thank you.